So I used to be a conservative. I no longer am now. I'm actually a libertarian now. And a big reason for that is what I see as a contradiction within conservatism between supporting freedom, freedom of speech, to bear arms, and support for law enforcement. Because if the government were to infringe on our freedoms even more than it already has, such as banning assault rifles, for example, then the police would be the ones to enforce such tyrannical edicts, as the Canadian truckers discovered. So is there a contradiction here for conservatism? Why or why not?
Very smart question. I can see where you're coming from. So the way I would answer it is that we look at the FBI a lot differently than a local sheriff. So local sheriffs have been the ones defying all of these kind of gun-grabbing regulations and measures, because the sheriff is probably someone in your local community you trust, probably someone that got elected publicly, probably someone whose kids goes to the local school, and almost always is a strong adherent to the Constitution. But I think you are yielding towards is something you and I could have a lot of agreement with, which is it's the FBI, the ones that take the knee for BLM, the ones that are calling for mass gun control. Do I trust them? Absolutely not. But do I think that local police is not just important but necessary for human flourishing? Absolutely. And so I'm a localist with this stuff. I think that the less federal control when it comes to a lot of these issues, the better. I question so much of the legitimacy of what the FBI is doing recently, and it pains me to say that as an American patriot, where I look at everything they do through a political lens now, from raiding Mar-a-Lago to spying on Donald Trump to the raiding of the homes of pro-life leaders. So your apprehension as a new libertarian is totally right. But I would just challenge you to be like, hey, that's a lot different than Sheriff Mark Lamb, for example, in Arizona, who is elected by the local people and doing everything he possibly can to go after smugglers and would never enforce a gun confiscation measure. And so we need to support our local police. Very, very important. They're in our community. They're one of us. Where the FBI is, though, I look at them as almost kind of infantry for the regime. Does that make sense?
Well, it's that, police, whether federal, state, or local, they're tasked with upholding, all the laws of the United States of America, federal, state, and local. So if the federal government were to, for example, pass a law that banned assault rifles, then wouldn't the local police then be compelled to enforce that law? Is that not something that
That's a good question. We've already seen, though, a track record and a pattern of local police and sheriffs, hundreds, saying, I will not enforce any of these. Montana, for example, came out through every one of their sheriffs and said, we're not going to enforce an assault rifle ban. We will ignore the federal government. So I would just challenge you to kind of look at some of that, at how some of these more local law enforcement agencies are already vocalizing that they are willing to say we are not going to enforce an unconstitutional measure from the federal government. But your apprehension is well-founded. I don't consider it a contradiction. I consider it a nuance and an important difference. But I think you would also agree you need some form of law enforcement, and I would much rather be policed by people that live in our communities, that are close to us and share our concerns, than somebody far off in a distant land. And I'll close with this. The left does not want to defund the police. They want to destroy local police and replace it with a national police force. And so you and I can definitely have agreement that a national police force is horrifying. It's something we do not support. I want thousands of local sheriffs that are accountable to the people and far less federal involvement kind of parachuting into our communities telling us what to do.